The universe is vast and our own planet still holds profound mysteries. Consider the night of March 8, 2014. Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370, a modern Boeing 777-200ER, embarked on what should have been a routine journey. It departed from Kuala Lumpur International Airport, its destination Beijing, China, carrying 227 passengers from diverse nations and a dedicated crew of 12. Families awaited reunions, business colleagues anticipated meetings, and tourists looked forward to new adventures. Yet, this flight was destined to become one of aviation's most perplexing enigmas, a stark reminder of how quickly the familiar can dissolve into the unknown, leaving behind a void of questions. The initial phase of the flight proceeded without any apparent incident, a standard ascent into the darkened skies. The aircraft, registered as 9MMRO, was a workhorse of long-haul travel, equipped with sophisticated navigation and communication systems. For those on board, it was likely an ordinary experience. The gentle hum of the engines, cabin lights dimmed for the overnight journey, the quiet anticipation of arrival. Air traffic controllers guided its path, just as they do for thousands of flights daily across the globe. There was no hint, no premonition that this particular aircraft was about to deviate from the predictable, charting a course into enduring mystery. The last voice communication from the cockpit occurred approximately 40 minutes after takeoff, as the plane was transitioning from Malaysian to Vietnamese airspace over the South China Sea. Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, an experienced pilot, uttered the now hauntingly calm words, "Good night, Malaysian 370. These were seemingly ordinary words, a standard sign-off. There was no distress in his voice, no indication of any trouble brewing within the aircraft or from external threats. This placid farewell would mark the final human interaction with the flight, a chilling prelude to an unprecedented silence that would soon envelop the aircraft and all souls aboard, baffling experts and grieving families. Shortly after this final transmission, something extraordinary and deeply unsettling happened. The aircraft's transponder, a device that communicates its identity, altitude, and location to air traffic control, suddenly ceased transmitting. Then, other communication systems also went dark. MH370 vanished from civilian radar screens, effectively becoming a ghost in the night sky. Imagine the scene in air traffic control rooms, a blip that was there reliably tracking its course, simply gone. This abrupt disappearance triggered a sequence of confusion, then concern, and ultimately a global search operation that would stretch the limits of technology and human endurance, all while the world asked, what happened to MH370? The absence of a transponder signal doesn't mean a large commercial airliner becomes entirely invisible, especially not to all forms of surveillance. While civilian air traffic control lost their primary means of tracking MH370, military radar systems, designed to detect non-cooperative targets, painted a different, more alarming picture. These systems, operated by Malaysian and Thai military, observed the aircraft making a sharp turn, a deviation that was anything but routine. Instead of continuing its northeasterly path towards Beijing, the plane veered dramatically westward, flying back over peninsular Malaysia. This maneuver was not communicated, not authorized, and immediately signaled that something was gravely amiss with the flight. The aircraft continued its westward journey, crossing over Malaysia and heading out towards the Andaman Sea, north of the Strait of Malacca. This path took it far from its intended route, a deliberate and sustained deviation that could only be achieved by someone with control of the aircraft. Think about the precision required for such a flight path, maintaining altitude and course changes without the aid of standard communication. It was a silent, purposeful journey into an area where civilian radar coverage is sparse. The plane was now a phantom, its intentions unknown, its passengers and crew cut off from the world, their fate hanging precariously in the balance as it flew further into the unknown. Even after it flew beyond the range of most ground-based military radar, MH370 was not entirely untraceable. Inmarsat, a British satellite telecommunications company, detected a series of faint electronic pings or handshakes from the aircraft. These automated signals, exchanged between the aircraft's satellite data unit and an Inmarsat satellite positioned in geostationary orbit over the Indian Ocean, indicated that the plane's systems were still powered up and operational for several more hours. These pings did not reveal precise location, speed, or altitude, but they provided crucial clues about the aircraft's general direction and endurance, suggesting it flew on for a staggering 7 hours after its last voice contact. The analysis of these satellite pings became a complex feat of engineering and mathematics. By measuring the time it took for the signals to travel and the slight Doppler shift caused by the aircraft's motion relative to the satellite, investigators were able to define two vast arcs where the final ping might have originated, one stretching north toward Central Asia, and the other south into the remote deep waters of the southern Indian Ocean. The northern arc covered land, which would likely have led to detection. The southern arc, however, painted a grim picture of a flight ending in one of the most isolated and inhospitable oceanic regions on Earth, far from any landfall. Years of painstaking investigation followed the startling disappearance, culminating in a comprehensive 495-page report released by the Malaysian Ministry of Transport in July 2018. This document, while meticulously detailed, did not provide the definitive answers the world craved. However, it did offer a stark conclusion regarding the aircraft's deviation from its flight path. The report stated that the change in course was likely the result of deliberate manual inputs to the aircraft's systems. This pointed away from a sudden catastrophic mechanical failure or an uncontrolled event, suggesting instead that someone in control of the Boeing 777 intentionally steered it off its planned route. The official report, however, stopped short of assigning blame or motive. While concluding that the aircraft's controls were deliberately manipulated, investigators could not definitively determine who was responsible for these actions. The backgrounds of the pilots, Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah and First Officer Fariq Abdul Hamid, were scrutinized intensely, as were those of the passengers and crew, yet no conclusive evidence emerged to pinpoint a perpetrator or a clear reason for such a drastic act. This ambiguity left a gaping hole in the narrative, fueling further speculation and frustration among the families of those on board who yearned for closure and a complete understanding of the events. The investigation also highlighted lapses and procedural errors on the part of air traffic control. The report noted delays in initiating emergency protocols after the aircraft disappeared from radar screens. There was confusion between Malaysian and Vietnamese air traffic controllers regarding which agency had responsibility for the flight as it neared the handover point. These shortcomings, while not the cause of the plane's disappearance, potentially complicated the initial response and the early stages of the search efforts. Such findings underscored the need for improved international coordination and more robust protocols in handling an aircraft that inexplicably goes silent in a busy airspace. Ultimately, the official report concluded that the investigation team was unable to determine the real cause for the disappearance of MH370. It presented a scenario where the aircraft likely flew until it exhausted its fuel, crashing into the southern Indian Ocean. Yet, without the wreckage, particularly the cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder, the precise sequence of events, the motivations behind any deliberate actions, and the final moments of the flight remained shrouded in an impenetrable fog of uncertainty. The report was a summary of what was known, but it also served as a stark testament to how much remained unknown, leaving the door wide open for theories to flourish. The initial response to MH370's disappearance triggered a massive multinational search effort, one of the largest and most expensive in aviation history. At first, efforts concentrated on the South China Sea, the area where the plane was last in contact with civilian air traffic control. But as data from military radar and satellite pings emerged indicating the drastic change in course and prolonged flight southward, the focus shifted dramatically. The southern Indian Ocean, a vast, remote and treacherous expanse of water, became the new target area. Australia took a leading role in coordinating this complex underwater search, alongside Malaysia and China, nations that had many citizens aboard the ill-fated flight. This underwater search, which commenced in late 2014, spanned over 120,000 square kilometers of challenging seafloor terrain. Specialized ships equipped with sophisticated sonar equipment, autonomous underwater vehicles, AUVs, and remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, scoured the depths, sometimes reaching over 6,000 meters. The conditions were incredibly difficult. Rough seas, unpredictable weather, and an ocean floor characterized by deep trenches, underwater volcanoes, and rugged ridges. The cost of this phase of the search escalated to approximately 200 million Australian dollars, around 143 million US dollars at the time, a testament to the resources poured into finding the aircraft. Despite these Herculean efforts, this extensive search was officially suspended in January 2017, having yielded no trace of the main wreckage. Despite the suspension of the official government-funded search, the quest did not entirely end. In early 2018, a private American company, Ocean Infinity, embarked on its own search mission. This operation was conducted on a no-cure, no-fee basis, meaning the company would only be paid if it found the wreckage. Utilizing a fleet of AUVs capable of surveying the seabed much faster than previous technologies, Ocean Infinity covered an additional 112,000 square kilometers of the Indian Ocean floor over several months. Hope was rekindled, but once again, the vast ocean held its secrets. The search concluded in May 2018, also without locating the aircraft, adding another layer of frustration to the ongoing mystery. While the main wreckage remained elusive, tangible evidence of MH370 did eventually surface, albeit piecemeal. Starting in July 2015, more than a year after the disappearance, pieces of debris began washing ashore on the coasts of African countries and islands in the western Indian Ocean, such as Reunion Island, Mozambique, and Tanzania. Over 30 pieces of suspected debris were recovered. Crucially, several of these items, including a flaperon, a part of an aircraft wing, were confirmed by investigators to be from MH370. These discoveries, while heartbreaking, validated the analysis of the satellite data pointing to a crash in the southern Indian Ocean, but they offered few clues about the cause of the disaster itself. Section 5: New Horizons, Hope Rekindled for a Renewed Search. Even as years passed, the mystery of MH370 continued to gnaw at investigators, scientists, and the public. In August 2024, a significant development emerged when an Australian scientist from the University of Tasmania proposed a new, more precise potential crash site. This claim was based on a re-examination of data, including information from Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah's home flight simulator, which reportedly contained a plotted course into the southern Indian Ocean. The scientist suggested that previous searches might have overlooked critical information, pinpointing a location in a deep 6,000-meter trench at the eastern end of Broken Ridge, a geologically complex area in the southern Indian Ocean. This brought a fresh surge of cautious optimism. This new analysis, coupled with the persistent advocacy of families, spurred Malaysian authorities to reconsider another search. By late 2024 and into early 2025, discussions were underway with Ocean Infinity, the same U.S. firm that conducted the 2018 search. The company presented a new no-cure, no-fee proposal, demonstrating their continued commitment to solving the enigma. The Malaysian government showed a willingness to engage, acknowledging the pain of the families and the global interest in finding answers. The prospect of a technologically advanced search vessel once again combing the ocean depths offered a glimmer of hope that had begun to fade for many. In December 2024, a pivotal moment arrived when Malaysia's transport minister announced an agreement in principle to Ocean Infinity's latest proposal. This new search, if the wreckage were found, could be worth up to $70 million to the company. The proposed search area was to cover an additional 15,000 square kilometers, likely incorporating the newly identified zone of interest near Broken Ridge. This decision marked a significant step forward, signaling a renewed official commitment to locating MH370. The focus was on leveraging the latest advancements in underwater search technology and refined data analysis to explore areas previously unexamined, or not surveyed with sufficient detail. As of early 2025, the anticipation for the new search operation was palpable. Ocean Infinity reportedly deployed ships towards the potential new search area, positioning themselves to take advantage of the optimal weather window in the southern Indian Ocean, which typically runs from January to April. However, the final contract with the Malaysian government was, as of March 2025, still pending finalization. The families of the 239 people on board, and indeed the world, watched with bated breath, hoping that this new chapter in the search might finally bring the closure and the answers that have been sought for over a decade since that fateful night. Section 6: The Pilot Paradox, Hero, Hijacker, or Victim. Among the swirling theories surrounding MH370's disappearance, those focusing on the actions of Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah have remained prominent and deeply unsettling. One of the most debated scenarios is that the captain deliberately downed the aircraft in a meticulously planned murder-suicide. This theory often suggests he may have locked his co-pilot Farik Abdul Hamid out of the cockpit, depressurized the cabin to incapacitate passengers and crew while using the pilot's oxygen supply, and then flew the plane to its remote end. The discovery of a flight path into the deep southern Indian Ocean on his home flight simulator added fuel to this speculation, though its significance is debated by experts. The alternative, yet equally disturbing, pilot-centric theory posits that Captain Zahari might have hijacked his own aircraft for reasons unknown, perhaps intending to land it at a clandestine location or make a political statement. If this were the case, the prolonged flight far off course, the disabling of communication systems, and the precise navigation would all point to a skilled pilot in full control, executing a predetermined plan. However, extensive investigations into the captain's personal life, finances, mental health, and political affiliations, as detailed in the official 2018 report, found no definitive red flags or clear motives that would conclusively support such a drastic and destructive course of action. The official report indeed stated that there was no evidence to suggest that the PIEC, pilot in command, and FO, first officer, had been experiencing any psychosocial stress that might have affected their psychological well-being or ability to fly the aircraft. This finding complicates the narrative of a rogue pilot. Captain Zahari was a highly experienced and respected senior pilot with Malaysia Airlines, with thousands of flight hours. First Officer Farik Hamid was younger, but was also on a promising career path. For many, it remains difficult to reconcile the image of these professional aviators with the idea of them perpetrating such an act of mass murder or a complex hijacking. This leaves us with the pilot paradox. Was Captain Zahari a victim of unforeseen circumstances, a hero battling an unknown emergency, or the architect of the entire tragedy? Without the cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder, piecing together his actions and intentions in the final hours of MH370 is an almost impossible task. The human element remains central to this mystery. If it was deliberate pilot action, the motive remains buried. If it was not, then what other sequence of events could explain the plane's bizarre final journey? The questions linger, casting a long shadow over the legacy of the men in control of the aircraft. Section 7. Shadows of Doubt. Hijackings, Remote Control, and Military Whispers. Beyond theories centered on the pilots, the idea of a more conventional hijacking by third parties has also been extensively explored. One such hypothesis suggests that MH370 was commandeered by individuals or a group intending to use the aircraft as a political bargaining chip, or perhaps to land it at a remote, undisclosed location, possibly in Central Asia as suggested by one of the early satellite data arcs. The disabling of communication systems and the deliberate flight path changes are consistent with a sophisticated hijacking. However, no credible claim of responsibility ever emerged, and the logistics of landing a Boeing 777 undetected and keeping 239 people captive present enormous, almost insurmountable challenges for any non-state actor. Another persistent, though more technologically speculative theory, involves the concept of remote hijacking or cyber terrorism. This idea posits that malicious actors could have gained control of the aircraft's systems remotely, overriding the pilot's inputs and directing the plane to its doom. Boeing did patent a system in 2003 for remote piloting of an aircraft, but the company has consistently stated that this technology was never implemented on commercial aircraft, including the Boeing 777. Furthermore, aviation security experts largely dismiss this theory due to the complexity of such an attack, and the lack of any supporting evidence that such a vulnerability existed or was exploited on MH370. Whispers and more direct accusations of military involvement have also circulated widely, often pointing fingers at the United States. One prominent theory suggests that MH370 was shot down, either accidentally or intentionally, near the U.S. military base on Diego Garcia, a remote atoll in the Indian Ocean. Proponents of this theory question the lack of radar data from such a strategically important base. However, there is no substantial evidence to support this claim, and U.S. officials have denied any involvement or knowledge of the aircraft's fate in that region. The southern Indian Ocean crash site, supported by debris analysis, also makes a Diego Garcia scenario less geographically plausible without further complex maneuvering. Adding to the geopolitical intrigue, some theories have even implicated Russian involvement, suggesting Russian operatives hijacked the plane and flew it to Kazakhstan, or another location within Russia, possibly as a response to international sanctions or for other strategic reasons. Like many other theories, this one suffers from a profound lack of credible evidence and relies heavily on conjecture about motives and capabilities. The vast distances involved, the difficulty of evading all detection, and the absence of any subsequent intelligence pointing to such an outcome make this scenario highly improbable in the eyes of most investigators and analysts, yet it persists in the darker corners of online discussion. Section 8. Fire, Failure, or Foul Play. Unpacking other theories. Not all theories about MH370 involve deliberate human malice. Some focus on catastrophic onboard emergencies. One of the more plausible non-deliberate scenarios involves a fire in the cargo hold, potentially linked to the large consignment of lithium-ion batteries that MH370 was carrying. Lithium batteries are known to be a fire risk if improperly packaged or damaged. Such a fire could have rapidly produced toxic smoke, incapacitating the crew, or caused critical system failures. The initial turnback towards Malaysia observed on radar could be interpreted as the pilots attempting to divert to the nearest suitable airport before succumbing to the fire or its effects, with the plane then flying on autopilot until fuel exhaustion. Another possibility is a sudden, catastrophic mechanical failure. While modern aircraft like the Boeing 777 have multiple redundancies and are built to withstand significant system failures, an uncontained engine failure, a rapid decompression event causing structural damage, or a critical flight control system malfunction could, in theory, lead to loss of control or an inability to communicate. However, the prolonged flight after the initial deviation, and the apparent controlled nature of the maneuvers make a single sudden mechanical failure less likely as the sole explanation, unless it incapacitated the crew while leaving the aircraft's automated systems to continue flying on a programmed or default heading. Theories involving the plane's valuable human cargo have also emerged, such as the patent conspiracy. This theory focused on the presence of 20 employees from Freescale Semiconductor, a technology company, on board. It was speculated that the plane was down to allow a third party, perhaps billionaire Jacob Rothschild according to some versions, to gain control of a valuable patent held by these engineers. However, this theory has been largely debunked. Investigations showed the patent rights were not structured in a way that their deaths would transfer ownership as claimed, and the individuals involved were not the sole holders of any such critical patent. It highlights how a lack of concrete information can breed elaborate if unfounded narratives. Other, more fringe theories include the idea of a stowaway gaining access to critical areas of the aircraft and taking control, though the security measures and technical knowledge required make this highly improbable. A group calling itself the Chinese Martyrs Brigade briefly claimed responsibility in the early days, but this was widely dismissed as a hoax. Initial reports of passengers' mobile phones still ringing when called were attributed by experts to network search phenomena rather than the phones being active. And as with many unexplained disappearances, even outlandish theories like alien abduction have been mentioned, underscoring the human desire to find any explanation, no matter how improbable, in the face of a void. Section 9. The Enduring Enigma. 11 years on, the search continues. As of May 2025, more than 11 years have passed since Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 vanished from our skies. The passage of time has done little to dull the sharp edges of this profound mystery. It remains an open wound for the families of the 239 souls on board, who continue to live in a painful limbo, caught between fading hope and the stark reality of an unresolved loss. The world, too, remains captivated by this aviation enigma, a puzzle that challenges our understanding of modern technology, human behavior, and the vast, often unforgiving nature of our planet. The search continues not just in the physical realm of ocean exploration, but in the relentless pursuit of data and analysis. The story of MH370 is a stark reminder of the limits of our current technology, despite the incredible interconnectedness of our world. In an age where satellites map our globe and devices track our every move, the idea that a Boeing 777 can simply disappear seems almost inconceivable, yet it happened. The efforts to locate the aircraft have pushed the boundaries of underwater search capabilities, employing some of the most advanced sonar and autonomous underwater vehicle technology ever developed, yet the deep ocean guards its secrets fiercely. The confirmed debris, washed ashore thousands of kilometers from the suspected crash zone, offers tantalizing but incomplete clues to the aircraft's final hours. The renewed search efforts, potentially spearheaded by Ocean Infinity with its advanced technology and no-cure, no-fee approach, offer a fresh beacon of hope. Every new analysis of satellite data, every re-examination of flight simulations, and every technological advancement in deep-sea exploration brings us potentially one step closer to finding the wreckage. Locating the aircraft's black boxes, the cockpit voice recorder, and the flight data recorder remains the ultimate goal. These devices hold the key to unlocking the sequence of events that occurred on board, potentially revealing whether the plane's fate was the result of deliberate action, catastrophic failure, or some other unforeseen circumstance. Until that day comes, MH370 will persist as a haunting question mark in aviation history. It compels us to reflect on the vulnerabilities that still exist within our sophisticated systems, the profound psychological toll of uncertainty, and the unwavering human spirit that drives us to seek answers, even in the face of overwhelming odds. The ultimate unveiling of what happened to Flight MH370 would not only bring closure to the grieving families but would also provide invaluable lessons to enhance aviation safety and security for generations to come. The universe of possibilities remains open, but the hope for truth endures.